military and intelligence leaders have often relied upon the services of a Texas-based corporation called E-Systems. If you've never heard of it, that's just fine with the company executives. They operate in what is called the black world, a place so secret that it's off limits to all but those who take an oath of secrecy for life. Employees are forbidden by law from disclosing anything about their world except to those with an official need to know. Amidst the cowfields and farm roads of Greenville, Texas, located about 50 miles northeast of Dallas, lies the largest division of E-Systems, where big business meets the covert world of espionage. E-Systems employs 16,000 people worldwide and does $2 billion a year in business. It's a Fortune 500 company that's traded on the New York Stock Exchange with 10,000 shareholders. And when it comes to electronic surveillance and sophisticated communications systems, experts will tell you that E-Systems is the best in the world at what it does. But hardly anyone knows exactly what that is. Of the company's $2 billion in annual sales, 85% of it is classified, according to defense industry experts, and an estimated $800 million involves projects so sensitive that the government publicly denies they even exist. John Harbison, who works for the consulting firm of Booz, Allen, and Hamilton, tries to keep track of what E-Systems is doing. But he says less is known about the company than perhaps any other defense contractor.
The information I have on the company is all based on information that's been reported in public sources of information. And as they say in the industry, that information is therefore inherently unreliable because some of it is disinformation.
Why would a company like E-Systems put out disinformation about what it's doing?
It's not the company electing to do that. It's really the customer. That's part of what the customer needs to do in order to try to protect its secrets.
The customer is the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and just about every U.S. intelligence agency there is. Over the years, E-Systems has won their trust and gotten to bid on contracts that other companies don't even know exist. Its secret to success? In large part, it knows how to keep a secret. Over the past year, we've made more than a dozen phone calls to E-Systems and one personal visit to company headquarters in Dallas in hopes of getting an interview. Each approach was politely but emphatically rebuffed. So we decided to visit an arms exhibit in Washington, D.C., where E-Systems had a booth, in hopes of getting some additional information about the corporation. What can you tell me about this company?
Well, we're a worldwide builder and distributor of electronic warfare and communication systems, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. We really don't do interviews.
You don't say anything, or you don't talk to the press at all?
No, we don't talk to the press. Sorry.
We've gone around and talked to a lot of other defense contractors, and people have been very cooperative. And you can't give us the same sales pitch that you've given other people?
Well, are you in the business? No.
We're in the business of reporting.
Yeah, well, you're not in the business of buying stuff, so why should I waste my time? Sorry.
The only glimpse we got inside the company comes from this corporate video. We didn't get it from E-Systems. They refused to make it available. We got it from the Department of Defense under the Freedom of Information Act.
E-Systems is engaged in many significant projects essential to the defense of our country.
We do know that it makes highly sophisticated, cutting-edge optical and listening devices used to spy on everyone from dictators to drug lords to terrorists. E-Systems outfitted the so-called Doomsday Plane that would enable the president to command U.S. forces during a nuclear war. And during the Persian Gulf War, it was E-Systems technology that served as the eyes and the ears of American generals who were able to watch the battle unfold from their offices in the Pentagon. But that's not all that E-Systems does. The company is believed to concoct phony secret contracts with bogus code names and paper trails to mislead potential snoopers both inside and outside the company. And on occasion, according to former employees, workers here at the Greenville plant have been asked to paint over tail numbers on planes suspected of being used on covert operations. The company's upper ranks have long included retired senior members of the U.S. military and intelligence establishments. According to Jay Miller, a Texas-based aviation writer who's followed E-Systems for years, the revolving door out of the black world often leads to E-Systems. If we walked into E-Systems either at Greenville or in Dallas and marched all of the people outside and lined them up against the wall, and how many of them do you think would be
Central Intelligence Agency? I'd say there were relatively a large number of ex-agency people and possibly some who are still active agency. That's going to be part of the corporate culture, in effect, the preservation of that culture.
But where does E-Systems stop and where does the CIA begin?
Well, I'm not sure I have a firm grip on that myself.
And neither does anyone else. The secrecy at E-Systems is so complete that not even lawyers armed with subpoena power have been able to find out much about the company, even when an employee is involved in a fatal shooting. It was in this hotel in El Paso, Texas, where the black world met the real world. 26-year-old Katrina Uribe, who checked into the hotel in September of 1991, reached for a baby bottle when a bullet ripped through the wall of her room, struck her in the chest, and killed her almost instantly. Her husband, Carlos, who was in the room when it happened, says immediately after the shooting, a man burst into their room.
He starts saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." I shot the gun accidentally. I was cleaning the gun and suddenly it went off.
Did he explain why he was cleaning the gun?
Yes, he was telling me that he was cleaning the gun because he needed it for his job. It was for security because of his job required it. And he repeated it several times. And that's all he said.
The man who accidentally shot Mrs. Uribe was Truett Wayne Burney, an E-Systems employee with a top-secret security clearance seen here in a videotaped deposition.
Yes, sir. I thought the pistol was empty.
Burney accidentally shot Mrs. Uribe with a Glock 45 caliber semi-automatic pistol loaded with hollow point bullets, kind that expand upon impact to create a more deadly path of destruction. Carlos Uribe's lawyer, David Berg, tried to find out from E-Systems executives why one of its employees was armed to the teeth.
Every time we came to the critical issue, what were you guys doing out there in El Paso that caused you to carry a weapon? What were you doing at the off-site locations? The manager of security would interrupt and say, "That's classified."
What was it like trying to get information about E-Systems from the United States government?
Almost impossible. It was very frustrating. I haven't had this much trouble in a lawsuit ever.
But Berg managed to dig up some evidence on his own, including this letter, written by Truett Burney's attorney to the grand jury investigating the death of Katrina Uribe. In it, the lawyer says that Burney and his co-workers at E-Systems were part of an anti-drug task force that included the Defense Department and several federal law enforcement agencies. Their mission was to install top-secret listening devices on a suspected drug trafficker's home. Do you know if the government had a warrant to carry out a bugging operation in the United States?
The executives of E-Systems have told me under oath that there was no such order that would allow them to implant or place a bugging device. You have to have a court order for that.
When Berg took depositions from E-Systems officials, they insisted that the company wasn't contracted by the U.S. government to bug anyone's home. They also said there was nothing dangerous about Burney's work and argued that he didn't need a gun for his job.
There was no danger whatsoever.
No more than driving down the highway.
But E-Systems' former manager of security, John Lanting, says that's just not true. As part of the company's legal defense team in the Uribe case, he saw an internal corporate document that contradicts the sworn testimony you just heard from that E-Systems company official.
In that document, it stated that the mission that the E-Systems employees were performing at El Paso was extremely dangerous.
Did it say why it was dangerous?
No, it didn't. It just said it was extremely dangerous and could cause harm to the employee or their family.
Was there a discussion of whether this document was going to be turned over to the Uribes?
All I remember is that it was said by the attorneys that this document would not be released to David Berg.
Lanting is now suing E-Systems, saying the practices he found there forced him to resign from the company. The Uribe family lawsuit against E-Systems was scheduled for trial on January 18, 1994. But just after the judge granted us permission to videotape the proceedings, E-Systems decided to settle the case out of court for $4.2 million.
Something went on down there that E-Systems doesn't want out. And if it wasn't bugging, the fact that all 5 of their employees down there were carrying weapons 3 of them semi-automatic weapons, indicates that they were doing something very dangerous that they don't want us to know about.
What's the significance of all this?
Here you have the federal government contracting with a private company. And what happened in this case was that, in fact, E-Systems became the government.
Or the government became E-Systems?
Yes, it's a distinction without a difference. It is, in fact, what happened.
And that was the experience of this man, too, Erwin Rautenberg, a Los Angeles businessman. How would you describe the relationship between E-Systems and the government and the intelligence agencies?
Very close, extremely close. What more can I tell you? Possibly, in many cases, one and the same.
For nearly 20 years, Rautenberg agreed to let the CIA use a branch of his legitimate air freight forwarding company to conceal secret government shipments overseas to Vietnam and elsewhere.
Everyone thought it was one company, okay? But it was not one company. There was 2 companies. One was a private company, and the other one belonged to Uncle Sam.
The CIA?
Yes.
The company that belonged to Uncle Sam was Air Asia, a subsidiary of the notorious CIA secret airline, Air America. In 1975, Congress pressured the CIA to sell off its front companies, and guess who bought Air Asia? That's right, E-Systems. Mr. Rautenberg, when E-Systems bought Air Asia, what did your friends at the CIA tell you about how the operation might change?
They told me that nothing is going to change, that the operation would be the same except in a different wrapping.
That it would still be a government operation?
Oh, yes, definitely.
In fact, Rautenberg says it was essentially the same operation for the next 6 years, until 1981, when his services were abruptly terminated. He sued E-Systems in federal court for breach of contract, but he ran into a brick wall and a lot of black ink when his lawyers tried to learn more about the company. The presiding federal judge, after a visit from the CIA, issued a most unusual order, something Rautenberg's attorney, Robert Gerstein, says he's never seen before.
It was an order which prohibited the parties to this lawsuit from finding out about or disclosing anything about E-Systems' classified relationship with the United States government.
Was there anything else unusual about the secrecy order?
None of the parties could even reveal the existence of the order or the fact that the government had sought it, and it had provisions saying that none of the parties could have copies of the order, and that they could only see the order for a brief period of time in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that they could not take notes or record their comments on the order in any way while they were seeing it.
So not only were you prohibited from making inquiries about E-Systems' relationship with the government, aside from Air Asia,
yes,
but you couldn't even talk about the existence of the secrecy order.
It was not only a secrecy order, but it was a secret secrecy order.
According to court records, and we're not making this up, the secret secrecy order was so secret that not even the judge could have a copy of it.
And he emphasized that constantly, that he could not keep a copy of it in the courthouse, that when he needed to see it, it had to be brought over by these guys with Uzis under their trench coats.
Literally?
That's what he said.
Yes.
Last year, Rautenberg won $5.9 million in a separate lawsuit against E-Systems in California State Court. His suit against E-Systems in federal court is still pending. As for that secrecy order, after 7 years of litigation that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, Rautenberg can now talk about the secrecy order, but he still can't have a copy of it.
Time Magazine, the New York Times, Rolling